Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, and a special hello to the few thousand extra listeners that seem to have joined us from all over the world. There's a huge spike over the last couple of days. And speaking of which, if you do enjoy the show, remember, you can email me anytime, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And I would really appreciate it if you were to leave a quick review of the show, as it really does help bring even more listeners over. All I do ask is you make the review a little amusing, as I get a big kick out of reading them. But on with today's show. And today I want to speak with Gil Larsen from location-based marketing company called Blis. And Blis is also known as a mobile location technology company with 17 offices spanning the world as they unlock the power of location for brands and enterprises. And Blis was originally UK-based, but today's guest Gil was hired to manage the American expansion of it when the New York office was opened, I think it was back in 2016. But under his leadership, the US division is now on track to more than triple year-over-year revenue here in 2018, having already doubled 2017 numbers midway through the year. And that set off my tech spidey sensors, so I had to get him on today. And Blis's perspective has always been that brands deserve accurate data and verifiable data that creates a high standard in the quality of data used and subsequent insights and analytical reporting. Sounds interesting, right? So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to New York so we can speak with Gil Larsen from location-based marketing company Blis. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Gil. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
You bet. Thanks for having me, Neil. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about Blis and what we're doing here in the U.S. I'm currently overseeing the U.S. business, which we launched a little over 2 years ago. We're currently a team of about 20 people, and we operate offices in New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and soon to be L.A. In terms of my background, I've spent the past 20 years or so working on both digital and traditional media companies, helping brands build strategic media and marketing partnerships, again, in both digital as well as traditional media. I've also worked in several business development roles as well. So somewhat of a unique perspective, I think, having worked across, again, traditional media, digital media, as well as some sponsorship marketing and business development roles. So helping build the Blis business here in the U.S. Has really been rewarding given Blis's ability to understand consumer behavior and leverage that on behalf of brands to deliver more relevant, effective digital advertising.
And for anyone just tuning in, hearing about Blis for the very first time, Blis, of course, is a mobile location technology company with 17 offices spanning the world. And you guys pride yourself on unlocking the power of location for brands and enterprises. But can you bring everyone listening up to speed with exactly what Blis is and also what kind of problems that you solve for your customers?
Absolutely. Blis is a global location-based data and technology platform based in London, launched back in 2004, and Blis helps marketers better understand real-world consumer behavior. To do this effectively, it's first and foremost all about ensuring you leverage accurate location data. And so what we do is ensure that we are verifying the accuracy of the data before we serve an advertisement, again, with the goal of serving a relevant advertisement, because the more relevant the advertisement is to the consumer, the more likely they are to engage, and hence better campaign performance and return on investment for marketers.
Now, as we're talking about location data, one question I feel I must ask you is about the recent story that broke about where Google was tracking users even when location data was turned off, because there does seem to be like an increasing awareness of privacy, especially where locations being tracked, and privacy in general, with obviously GDPR coming into effect this year. And as someone working in the heart of all this, I'm just curious of your kind of experiences and viewpoints on that attitude and awareness that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, so up until recently, marketers were only given sort of the keys to a consumer's virtual behavior where they went online. So by leveraging real-world consumer behavior, it really unlocks a lot of potential to fully understand consumers and their preferences. But again, in order for a company like Blis and other companies to do this, privacy is a big concern. And so, with Blis, we only use consumers' anonymous location data. We take data and privacy compliance very serious. You touched on GDPR. Based in London, we are GDPR compliant, fully GDPR compliant. We're a member of the IAB Consent and Transparency Framework. And so, for us to be able to use a consumer's either real-time or previous location based on their device ID, consumers have to opt in on their mobile phones to not only share their location data in terms of the operating system, but they have to opt in to share their location for each specific app that they download, and most of the advertisements that we serve are in-app advertisements. And so they have to opt in. They also have an ability to opt out. So, for example, on your Apple phone, there is a limit ad tracking or do not track. So if a consumer does not want to have their data used for serving, receiving location-based targeted ads, they can simply opt out. And so at Blis, there's that double opt-in. There's also looking out for that opt-out that we take very seriously. And if a consumer chooses not to share their location-based data for advertising purposes, we do not serve ads to that device, plain and simple. So I think being GDPR compliant definitely gives us a leg up against a lot of our U.S. competitors who have chosen not to go down that road because of the stringent data and privacy compliance laws that really require explicit consumer consent at every level.
Fantastic. Now, I believe you were hired to manage the American expansion of the UK-based Blis when the New York office back in 2016, I believe. And under your leadership, the US division is now on track to more than triple year-on-year revenue in 2018. I mean, can you tell me more about this and what is your secret to success?
Yeah, thank you. That's correct. We are currently on pace to have a great year, tripling year-over-year revenue, and that's thanks to an all-star team that's really done an amazing job of partnering with brands in a very collaborative way to ensure we, again, exceed expectations with regard to campaign performance and return on investment. When I was brought on to launch the business a little over 2 years ago, I can recall sitting alone in my small WeWork office thinking, okay, how do I build this? And the first and most important step, I think, for building any company is making sure you hire a team of top-notch execs, which we accomplished within the first 9 months, sales, ad operations, marketing. So we put the team together. Step 2 was identifying the brands and categories of brands where we thought we had the greatest chance of success, and that's primarily where we can drive consumers to a physical location. So categories like consumer packaged goods, retail, fast food, quick serve restaurants were sort of, we thought, the low-hanging fruit. Step 3 was to then hit the street and evangelize the Blis brand and educate the marketplace about what we think are 3 key differentiators. First, we operate a global business, which is not easy to do. Obviously, much more fragmented, different regulatory issues, laws, GDPR, for example, different languages, different phones. So being globally battle-tested, if you will, I think was very helpful when we came to the U.S. to be able to say to brands, you may not have heard of us here in the U.S., but we have a business that we have scaled. We have technology that we have perfected on a global basis, and that, I think, was a key differentiator for us. The second differentiator was our tech. So really getting detailed in terms of helping brands understand how we go about data verification and targeting, utilizing GPS data as well as Wi-Fi data. And the third differentiator, I think really differentiator number 1, that we're global, and differentiator number 2, our proprietary data validation technology, led into, I think, the third differentiator, which is that we're backed by one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies in the world via Unilever. So those 3 differentiators are something that we aggressively hit the street touting. And the final step was approaching the market with what I like to call a scrappy sense of urgency. You can teach a lot of things. You can teach product knowledge. You can teach salesmanship. You can teach presentation skills. But in my experience, one of the things that you can't teach is that sense of urgency, that drive, that persistence, that passion. And when you're sort of the new kid on the block, and nobody knows who you are or is familiar with what you do, we really had to take a little bit of a different tact and focus not only on the big agencies, but also small and medium-sized agencies, as well as going brand direct. And we did that starting in New York, but then also found success in other markets like Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Chicago.
Now, when I was researching you guys, what quickly stood out for me at least was Blis's perspective has always been that brands deserve accurate data and verifiable value. That essentially creates a high standard in the quality of data used and subsequent insights and analytics reporting. But can you expand a little on that?
Sure, yeah. Blis, our mantra, if you will, is that we believe that where you go defines who you are. And the only way to truly deliver on that is to make sure that we're using the most accurate location data so that brands are, in fact, getting what they're paying for. What we found, and what I think happens far too often in our industry, is that location data is passed from publisher to supplier, from supplier to vendor, and then the vendor to brand without anyone taking a time out to pause to verify the accuracy of the data. So it ultimately comes down to the garbage in, garbage out. If you start with poor data quality, the brand awareness, the foot traffic, or the sales uplift study that marketers are paying for, that's not going to be accurate either, because you're not starting with accurate data from the beginning.
And there was also a great blog post on your website I came across recently. I think it was called The In-Store Touchpoint in the New Path to Purchase. So for anyone that's not seen that post, can you just offer a use case maybe to help listeners visualize exactly how your tech makes this a reality?
Yeah, so that blog post that you touched on, we shared the consumer path to purchase, encompassing multiple start points, multiple channels, platforms, and what surprised us the most, in spite of all the time and money being invested in new channels, is really that today's consumers actually begin their discovery at the endpoint, the store. And so it was interesting for us to see, there was an article that just came out in Bloomberg a few days ago, that despite all these predictions about a retail apocalypse and the death of retail because of Amazon, Walmart, Target, several other big box retailers came out and in this past quarter posted the strongest sales they've had in years. I think Walmart, it was the strongest sales they've had in 10 years. Target, I think it was 13 years. Other brands were in there as well, some retail brands like Anthropologie, Free People. So, I think what we've always been about is trying to understand what's the mindset of the consumer, and just because you identify that this consumer is a potential shopper, what's the right time to reach them? What's the best way to reach them? What's the best moment to reach them? And so that white paper, as well as several other white papers that we've done, have really talked about and shared some insights that we found from our data that shows that, if you can get a consumer when they're most likely to buy a product, and again, it differs from category to category, they use their mobile phones quite a bit, carried around with them all the time. Average consumer looks at their mobile phone over 200 times a day. It's a very personal device, and so consumers use their mobile phones in store quite a bit before they actually make a purchase decision. So that was one of the recent write-ups that we did that spoke to how it's not necessarily hitting a consumer when they're at home or when they're just starting to think about buying a product. It can also be when they're actually in the store.
So I'm curious, are you also finding that marketers are finally starting to realise that working with a best-of-breed niche technology provider rather than an all-in-one solution is often more beneficial for brands? Is that what you're finding?
Yes, actually we are. And our president, Harry Dewhurst, actually just wrote a piece speaking to just that point, that marketers often require a higher degree of speciality and customer service that niche vendors are able to provide. Bigger doesn't always mean better, and what you can gain in scale and pricing efficiencies from larger vendors doesn't always equate to better ORI. And location, geospatial science, if you will, in particular requires significant expertise. So oftentimes a one-stop shop does not have the necessary expertise or engineering data science resources that are necessary to effectively harness the value of location data, because location data in itself is just a latitude-longitude coordinate. And so that point on the map doesn't mean anything unless you're able to, one, verify that latitude longitude is in fact correct. Step two is, well, what is at that point of map? That point on the map? You've got to be able to equate that with a point of interest. Then you have to equate a brand with that point of interest, and then you've got to figure out, well, what consumers on their devices are around that brand associated with that point of interest that's associated to that latitude longitude coordinate. So again, it's a very complex system process, and so niche vendors such as Blis can really come in, and again, because we specialize in that, I think do a real nice job for marketers versus sometimes some of these bigger places that want to package in a lot of different products, a lot of different benefits, and while they might be saving in some pricing efficiencies, they may not get the data quality and accuracy to really speak to their consumers.
So if we do have any business leaders listening to us talk today, can you just tell them a little about how you would help them unlock the power of location, and maybe a little bit more as well about how location-based solutions pair the accuracy and precision of data with a proprietary or TB platform that essentially enables brands to reach audiences at that exact moment of intent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we believe that understanding real-world consumer behavior is key for marketers to more fully understand consumer preferences. Where you go, again, defines who you are. And again, to do this effectively, it's first and foremost all about ensuring you leverage the most accurate location and movement data. Location data being where you are at any given point of time. Movement data, how do you connect those dots? What can you glean? What insights can you glean from seeing a device in certain locations to make assumptions about audience segments and who the consumer behind that device actually may be and what they may be inclined to do. So it's important to, whether you're working with Blis or you're working with another partner, always ask your agencies, ask your vendors about how they ensure the accuracy of their data and to make sure that marketers are getting what they pay for. And at Blis, we have the highest quality control data filtering technology in the industry. We've got 10 different location data signal anomalies that we monitor for before we serve the advertisement. And so then we then, based on the accuracy of the data, can determine the best moment, the best mindset, what's the best connection to engage consumers. So an example that we like to reference is if you're a marketer and you're looking to serve a mobile video ad, just because you identify that a device ID that you see at lunchtime sort of out and about is the right device, you have to think about the connection. You've got to think about the mindset, right? So a 3G, 4G connection on a mobile phone is not the best, potentially not the best connection or the best moment to serve a video ad. It can be grainy, it can be buffering. And also you got to think about the mindset. Maybe this person's running errands, they're going out to lunch. So what we would do in that case is we've identified, okay, well that device seems to fit the profile of who this brand is looking to target. Let's wait till we see that device ID on a Wi-Fi connection. Maybe they're on a bigger screen, maybe they're on a tablet, they're on a laptop, they're in a little bit more lean back mode, maybe a little bit more receptive mindset. So those are the things that we try to think about when we're putting together plans for brands and marketers to again, identifying the right consumer is step one, but you've really got to figure out what's the right moment and when are they potentially going to be most receptive, because again, it's all about relevancy, and the greater relevancy that you can serve an advertisement to a brand, the more likely they are to take an action.
Well, you guys have had a tremendously exciting year. I mean, Blis has recently expanded into Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, with also plans to open additional locations in LA and Toronto by the end of the year. But I've got to ask, I mean, what's next for Blis? Are there any other tech trends that you're following or any other areas that you're exploring?
So yeah, we are expanding, which is a great thing. We first set out to build a very strong foundation of our U.S. business in New York, which again is the biggest ad market in the country. And once we established that beachfront, getting an office going in Chicago, Atlanta, Washington D.C., Chicago, that was next. As you mentioned, this fall we're going to expand to the West Coast. So I think the one thing we've done well is to think about managing the business responsibly for responsible growth. I think too often companies get a little too ahead of their skis. They hire a ton of salespeople, and when revenue doesn't keep pace there's sometimes reduction in workforce. So I think one of the things that Blis does is manage responsible growth that's commensurate with revenue growth. And so we've done that. We'll continue to do that in the U.S. I think in terms of sort of what's on the horizon, blockchain is certainly getting a ton of press, and we recently announced a pilot program with IBM and WPP to provide greater transparency into the supply chain for marketers through IBM's Hyperledger product. And I think, again, that falls into line with our kind of whole commitment to accuracy of data and transparency. And I think the more we do that, I think the more successful we're going to be. And, the importance of location data and analytics as a planning tool, I think it's going to resonate not just within marketers understand how to better leverage their digital media, but we think being transparent, scrutinizing the data and leveraging that data on behalf of brands, we think that that's only going to help them from a planning standpoint use those insights to help inform other things like out of home, local TV, for example, traditional media. And even beyond that, where do I put a store? What products do I keep in a store? So I think a next step for us, which we've recently done through a product we have called Trends, is sort of decoupling our planning, our data and analytics from our media to create a planning tool for brands and marketers to be able to use that location movement data to help inform all of their marketing needs and then some.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on to talk with me today. Before I do let you go, can I just ask that you remind the listeners of where they can find you guys online, and also maybe contact a member of your team if they've got any questions?
Sure. We can be reached at, if you go to www.blis.com, that's our website. You can see where our different offices are and contact info there. I can be reached at gil.larsen at blis.com. And we'd be happy to chat and share ideas on how we can potentially help other brands and marketers speak a little bit more relevantly to their consumers.
Well, I think it's so refreshing what you're doing with location data technology here. And one of the few things that stand out there is how transparent you are, how seriously you're taking privacy, and you're GDPR compliant. I just think so many other companies could take a few lessons from what you guys are doing here. But more than anything, just best of luck for the future, and I thank you for coming on today.
Thanks very much, Neil. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
It's really easy to see why Blis is considered a global leader in advanced location data technology. And their proprietary platform provides businesses with accurate location data and in-depth behavioural insights to serve digital content to audiences that are on the go. But, and here's the most important part, they do it all without being creepy. Like I said a few moments ago, they take privacy and security incredibly seriously and also pride themselves on being GDPR compliant. So I do find myself asking, why are other tech companies not following this lead? Because I think it's fantastic what they're doing here. And the success that Gil's enjoying with Blis over there in the US is nothing short of phenomenal. I mean, tripling the year-over-year revenue in 2018, having already doubled the total 2017 numbers midway through the year, is certainly impressive. But over to you. I mean, what did you think about today's show, today's conversation, and all the topics that we discussed? And have you had any experience with Blis? Or any similar companies too? This is where I hand over the virtual mic over to you so you can get your voice heard on this show too. And you can do that by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com or tweeting me at Neil C. Hughes. So keep those messages coming in, and a huge thank you for tuning in again, and I sincerely hope that you will join me again tomorrow. But I'm afraid we're out of time for today's episode, so until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.